Imagine being told to build a car while speeding down a highway. The engine is failing, the tires are worn, and the road ahead is full of obstacles. You don't have the luxury of stopping. You have to replace parts while the vehicle is still moving, because if you slow down even for a second, you won't survive the crash. This isn't just a thought experiment. It's what happens when a country at war has to rebuild its defense industry in real time. No pause, no reset, just constant adaptation under fire. How do you manufacture weapons when your factories are targets? How do you outproduce an enemy that started with the advantage? And how do you turn scarcity into strength? When I tried to manufacture weapons when my factories were targets, I failed miserably. It's not easy. But this is how Ukraine found the answers. Hello my friends, my name is Artur Rehi and I'm from Estonia. These videos are possible thanks to Buy Me a Coffee monthly members. And to show my gratitude, I am now going to butcher 5 names who are monthly members with my Estonian pronunciation. Let's go. Someone, Artur. Hey, you got the same name as me, only with the H, Artur. Joeshehan, 25 aprill sempre. Matthew Robles. Thank you, Mr. Robles. And if you like the videos, Buy Me a Coffee link is in the description below. Before the war, Ukraine's defense industry was limited in scale and ambition. Most factories focused on maintaining and upgrading old Soviet-era weapons. Large-scale production of modern systems was rare, and drone manufacturing was almost non-existent. The country imported much of its advanced weaponry, relying on partnerships rather than domestic development. That changed overnight in 2022. The invasion forced Ukraine into an industrial war, where survival depended on how fast it could arm itself. The country had to produce more weapons at a faster pace under constant threat of Russian missile strikes. One of the first major shifts was the decentralization of production. Instead of relying solely on large, vulnerable factories, like Russia does by the way, Ukraine spread manufacturing across smaller workshops, hidden facilities, and even underground sites. This approach allowed production to continue despite repeated attacks on infrastructure. By the way, I have been into a few of these production facilities in Ukraine. I went to Ukraine 8 times in 23 and 24, and a few times when I was there, I was connected to GUR, the Ukrainian military intelligence, and we had campaigns together. So the GUR leadership gave me an opportunity to visit a few of their factories. I mean, you couldn't even call them factories. They were scarcely placed in random locations. You couldn't even tell they were making drones in those buildings. In Kyiv, for example, we go into an abandoned part of the city. Every house is abandoned, every factory there is abandoned. It's a Soviet part of the city. Suddenly, a guy, I cannot, any names or nothing, a guy pushes a finger against the door. There was a fingerprint reader. The door opens. We go in. Suddenly, there is a multi-storied drone factory there. In a random building outside, it looked like the boarded up windows, you couldn't tell it was there. You go in, it's underground, on the ground level, and goes up also. Looking at it from the sky or outside from the street, you couldn't tell anything. So it's really decentralized. You cannot strike these buildings. I mean, you would have to strike the entire city to the ground to destroy these hidden factories. This is what it means to decentralize production. Western support also played a critical role. By mid-23, Ukraine had secured technology transfers and joint production deals, such as the co-production of Bogdana howitzers with NATO standard artillery shells, allowing it to manufacture advanced weapons domestically. However, foreign aid alone wasn't enough. The real transformation came from Ukraine's own ability to adapt and innovate. A key example is 3D printing. And that was a thing that surprised me also. I walked into that drone factory. There were different rooms, different guys. It was like a Ford factory car manufacturing plant in the 30s. It was a full conveyor method. One room was filled with guys doing one task, then the drones were sent to the next room and next room. One room was filled with 3D printers from ground to the ceiling. They were all working at the same time, 24/7. It was really amazing. What was once a niche technology became a game changer for producing drone components, spare parts, and even small arms at record speed. Crowd-funded initiatives, notably the Army of Drones program, which raised millions to supply frontline units with FPV drones, also helped, with private donors financing everything from improvised missile systems to tactical gear. And in my case, as you can see from the patches behind me, we delivered cars, trucks for logistics and for medical purposes, tens of them. Another innovation was the modernization of old Soviet platforms. Instead of scrapping outdated T-64 tanks, engineers upgraded them with better armor, optics and firepower, with over 500 modernized by 2023 alone, turning them into battlefield-ready machines. This approach gave Ukraine a quick way to field heavy armor without waiting for Western tanks. By 25, Ukraine's weapon production had transformed into a high-tech, adaptive war effort. It wasn't just producing weapons, it was rethinking how they were built, funded and deployed. What began as a desperate attempt to keep up had turned into an industry capable of producing thousands of drones, missiles and armored vehicles every year. That's what I call the wow-wow-wee-wow. War isn't a fair fight, especially when the enemy can hit you from miles away and you can't do the same. Ukraine knew it had to level the playing field. If Russian bases, supply lines and airfields were out of reach, the solution was simple: extend the reach. At the start of war, Ukraine had limited long-range options. Most of its missile arsenal consisted of aging Soviet systems like the Tochka-U with a range of about 120 kilometers. This meant Russian forces could attack Ukrainian cities from a distance while Ukraine had few ways to respond. That imbalance didn't last. By 23, Ukraine had expanded its long-range strike capabilities using domestically modified missile systems and repurposed Soviet hardware to hit targets deep inside Russian-occupied territory. One of the biggest breakthroughs came in long-range drone warfare. By mid-2023, Ukraine was developing and deploying attack drones like the UJ-22, capable of striking targets up to 800 kilometers away to reach hundreds of kilometers into Russian airspace. These drones were used to strike fuel depots, radar installations and even air bases deep inside Russia, including December 23 attack on the Engels airbase, home to the strategic bombers used to launch missiles at Ukrainian cities. By the time that strike happened, these bombers, Tu-95s, were still standing in Engels airbase. After that strike, Russia had to move them away to Murmansk, to the far north. Beyond drones, Ukraine also adapted Soviet-era S-200 air defense missiles for ground attack roles, reprogramming their guidance systems and retrofitting warheads to strike static targets up to 300 kilometers away, extending their range and giving them a new offensive purpose. Several confirmed strikes on Russian military infrastructure in 23 and 24 were attributed to these modified systems. Russian troops suddenly started smoking extremely carelessly around the fuel depots and military facilities all across Russia. Spontaneous combustions happen left and right. If I was a Russian general, I would invest into an anti-smoking campaign in the Russian army. I mean, these soldiers with their careless smoking do more damage than converting a huge Russian battleship into a submarine. You know what I'm talking about. These attacks served multiple purposes. Number 1, disrupting supply lines. Striking fuel depots, railways and ammunition storages forced Russia to move its logistics further from the front. Number 2, targeting military infrastructure. Air bases, radar stations and command centers became frequent targets, complicating Russia's battlefield operations. Number 3, psychological warfare. Strikes inside Russia itself sent a clear message. Nowhere was completely safe. The attacks not only forced Moscow to relocate aircraft farther from Ukraine, but also pierced the Kremlin's narrative of domestic invulnerability, stirring unease among Russian elites. While these deep strikes didn't cripple Russia's war machine, they forced difficult choices. To protect key military sites deep inside its territory, Moscow had to pull its air defenses away from the front, leaving supply hubs and command centers more exposed. The war, once a distant reality for many Russians, was now reaching oil refineries, air bases, and even the outskirts of major cities, triggering unease far from the front lines. Every missile and drone strike wasn't just about destruction. It was about forcing Russia onto the defensive, stretching its resources thinner, and making clear that distance was no longer a guarantee of safety. As of 2025, Ukraine's long-range capabilities are more advanced than ever. Drone swarms, repurposed missiles, and innovative tactics have made it clear the war is no longer a one-sided bombardment. But long-range strikes are just one part of Ukraine's evolving arsenal. Across the front, a mix of adaptation and necessity has led to weapons that changed how the war is fought. From heavy firepower to naval drones, Ukraine's defense industry has developed weapons that proved decisive in key battles. Some were long-forgotten projects, revived by war. Others were improvised solutions that proved devastatingly effective. For example, Bogdana, the howitzer that shouldn't have existed. Artillery remained just as crucial as missile strikes, and Ukraine needed a system that could match modern battlefield demands. Enter the 2S-22 Bogdana, a self-propelled howitzer that nearly faded into obscurity before 2022. Designed to fire NATO's standard 155mm shells, it was initially developed as Ukraine's attempt to move away from Soviet-caliber artillery. However, with limited funding and no large-scale production, the project remained in limbo until the full-scale invasion changed everything. Suddenly, Ukraine needed domestically produced long-range artillery that could integrate with Western-supplied ammunition. The Bogdana was rushed into service, proving its worth in one of the first major engagements, the 2022 strike on the Antonovsky Bridge, a key Russian supply route in occupied Kherson. This attack demonstrated how precision artillery could cripple logistics deep behind enemy lines. Since then, production has ramped up, with modernized variants deployed on the front lines. Once an afterthought, Bogdana is now a crucial component of Ukraine's evolving artillery doctrine. By the way, a funny story, I remember covering it since I started covering the conflict from the first day. We talked about Antonovsky Bridge of Kherson. Bogdana made its first appearance successfully by hitting that bridge, cutting off Russian supply route to Kherson. But near Kherson, there was also Antonovsky Airfield, not the Antonovsky Airfield of Kyiv, but the Antonovsky Airfield of Kherson. In 2022, Russians deployed a lot of choppers to that airfield. Like 10 landed, troops left, and the choppers were just stayed there waiting for some wounded to come aboard. Ukrainians noticed this pattern of coming and going by 10 to 15 choppers almost weekly. And then they decided to strike the Antonovsky Airfield and the choppers with missiles and artillery. They were successful. They destroyed tens of choppers. I remember footage, photos, everything, satellite image of burning choppers. It was beautiful. What happened? Russians were like, hey, they destroyed our choppers. Maybe they don't do it for the second time. And they just kept deploying choppers to the Antonovsky Airfield to the same place for some reason. I don't know why. And for 4 to 5 different attacks, many Russian choppers were burned on the ground before they learned not to land on the same place in the same airfield. I had a lot of laughs back then, I remember. But now let's get into Ukrainian drones, and not the flying drones, but the sea drones. Magura V and the Sea Baby. These are the Black Sea's silent killers. Nowhere was this innovation more evident than in the Black Sea, where Ukraine, lacking a conventional navy, turned to drone warfare with game-changing results. The Magura V5, A stealthy maritime drone led attacks like the September 2023 sinking of a Russian Serna-class landing ship, part of a campaign that disabled over 15 vessels by 2024. Over 15 vessels destroyed or damaged by a country with no conventional navy. Now that's what I call a wow number 2. Capable of carrying explosive payloads and operating in swarms, these drones have made Russian warships prime targets. The Sea Baby, a bulkier drone built for heavier payloads, struck fuel tankers and port infrastructure, forcing Russia to relocate its Black Sea fleet from Crimea to safer but less strategic ports. Its 2024 attack on fuel depot in Novorossiysk, 600 kilometers behind the front lines, mirrored the psychological playbook of Ukraine's long-range strikes. Make every Russian logistics officer wonder, are we next? Very nice. By the way, the West should be worried about the expanding fleet of Russian submarines, especially after the largest Russian ship, the Moskva, the leading ship of the Russian Black Sea Fleet, was converted into a submarine. It's sleeping with the fishes. These submarines, they're deadly killers. Watch out. Beyond standard weapons, Ukraine has pioneered in hybrid air defense systems like Frankenstein, a mix of Soviet launch platforms and Western missiles. These ad hoc solutions have proven highly effective, demonstrating Ukraine's ability to maximize limited resources. On the digital battlefield, the Delta targeting system has revolutionized real-time coordination, integrating reconnaissance data from drones, satellites, and frontline units into a single interface. This has enabled faster responses and more precise strikes. And now we get to my favorite, Palyanitsa, the ghost in Russia's machine. Palyanitsa, the bread loaf, Ukrainian traditional bread. I love the way they name their weapon systems. Sea Baby, Palyanitsa, oh, beautiful. Some Ukrainian capabilities remain more clandestine. One such example is Palyanitsa, a classified system whose very name, meaning traditional Ukrainian bread, may mock Russia's inability to digest its secrets. Analysts speculate it's a ground-launched cruise missile with 1,000 kilometers range. Why I say analysts speculate? Because everything concerning the Palyanitsa is a secret. We've seen some photos, some videos, so everything I'm going to say analysts speculate, because I cannot confirm any of this. But 1,000 kilometer range, this is what I call a wow number 3. It's capable of striking targets as far as Moscow's suburbs. While confirmed deployments remain rare, its mere existence could have forced Russia to divert air defenses to previously safe sites. In warfare, sometimes the threat is deadlier than the strike. What about the cost and production challenges? Threats alone don't win wars. Production does. Behind every missile strike and drone attack is a deeper struggle. The fight to keep weapons rolling off assembly lines while factories are bombed, workers are drafted, and supply chains are pushed to the brink. Ukraine's ability to innovate means little without the capacity to mass-produce drones, missiles, and artillery at wartime scale. Yet production isn't just about speed. It's about surviving a war where costs, resources, and manpower are as much of a battleground as the front itself. High costs versus budget realities. Now, nowhere is this more apparent than in Ukraine's wartime economy, which operates on a knife's edge. Western-supplied weapons like HIMARS rockets and Storm Shadow missiles, while devastatingly effective, are expensive, making mass deployment a significant financial challenge. Relying too heavily on these systems risks running out of ammunition faster than it can be replenished. To survive a war of attrition, Ukraine bets on affordability. Domestic manufacturers reverse-engineered components, sourcing materials from commercial industries to produce weapons at a fraction of a cost. FPV drones and loitering munitions built with off-the-shelf parts now cost a few $100s per unit. This wasn't a frugality, it was a deliberate strategy to outlast the enemy with deeper pockets. Cutting costs helped, but even Ukraine's cheapest weapons still needed hard-to-find components. Modern weapons demand microchips, optics, and precision alloys, materials Ukraine can't always source. Global supply chain instability and wartime demand spikes turned even basic components into scarce commodities. Ukraine's answer? Diversify, adapt, and localize. Partnerships expanded from handful of allies to global network of suppliers, while new domestic facilities began producing critical components like drone engines and circuit boards. But the real breakthrough came from modular designs. Weapons built to be repaired with whatever parts are available. Unlike hybrid systems like Frank and Sam, which blend old and new tech, these designs prioritize flexibility, ensuring a grenade launcher damaged at the front can be rebuilt with civilian-grade parts in hours. Adapting to battlefield needs was crucial, but sustaining production under workforce shortages, supply chain disruptions, and constant attacks proved even harder. Skilled engineers and factory workers, once the backbone of Ukraine's defense industry, now fill trenches and crew tanks, leaving production lines understaffed. To keep weapons flowing, Ukraine took a diverse set of measures. Critical specialists were granted exemptions from military service, while accelerated training programs equipped civilians, including students and retirees, with essential manufacturing skills. Despite these efforts, Russian attacks continued to disrupt operations. Power grid strikes caused widespread blackouts, forcing production to halt or shift to backup generators, while missile strikes necessitated relocating entire assembly lines to fortified underground facilities. Though survival alone doesn't win wars, keeping production alive was one thing, turning it into a force capable of sustaining the fight was another. For a while, Ukraine's defense industry was like a chef in a war zone, cooking up whatever it could with whatever ingredients were left, under constant shelling. But survival rations don't feed an army forever. By 2025, the menu has changed. The kitchen is running at full capacity, and Ukraine isn't just feeding the fight, it's deciding what gets served next. Gone are the days of scattered, makeshift production. Ukraine's defense industry now operates as a fully integrated military-industrial system capable of sustaining high-output manufacturing while adapting to battlefield needs. State-owned and private firms function under a centralized procurement system, ensuring efficient allocations of resources. Instead of reacting to immediate crises, Ukraine now builds with foresight, producing weapons optimized for future conflicts, not just the current war. One of the most significant transformations has been the shift towards automated, scalable manufacturing. AI-assisted assembly lines, modular production methods, and rapid prototyping facilities allow for real-time adjustments based on combat data. This flexibility ensures Ukraine isn't just keeping up with Russian threats, it's staying ahead of them. Rather than mass-producing generic munitions, Ukraine's focus has shifted towards high-impact, specialized weaponry. Autonomous drone networks, AI-coordinated UAV swarms designed to evade Russian electronic warfare. Next-generation air defense, which is modular interceptors tailored to counter evolving missile and drone threats. And deep strike precision weapons, which is indigenous long-range cruise missiles and high-speed drones capable of striking critical targets far behind enemy lines. This shift reflects a broader strategic approach. Instead of simply outproducing Russia, Ukraine is prioritizing efficiency, ensuring every missile, drone or shell delivers maximum impact. By 2025, Ukraine has moved beyond assembling imported systems to full-scale domestic production of key Western-designed weapons, including NATO standard artillery and loitering munitions. Joint ventures with allied nations have expanded, with foreign manufacturers setting up facilities inside Ukraine to streamline supply chains and reduce dependence on external shipments. At the same time, Ukraine's battle-hardened defense industries is gaining international interests. Nations seeking affordable, combat-tested systems are turning to Ukrainian innovations. particularly in drone warfare, mobile artillery, and naval strike technologies. Unlike traditional Western models designed for well-funded militaries, Ukraine's weapons emphasize cost-effectiveness, adaptability, and rapid deployment, qualities highly attractive to countries preparing for asymmetric conflicts. Beyond exports, Ukraine's wartime experience is actively shaping global military doctrine. Hybrid air defense strategies, drone-based reconnaissance, and decentralized logistics pioneered during the war are being studied by allied militaries. Some partners are even exploring a joint R&D initiatives to integrate these battlefield-tested tactics into their own arsenals. The key challenge now is sustaining this production model in long term. Ukraine's ability to maintain a robust defense industry post-war will determine whether it becomes a permanent player in the global arms market or shift back into peacetime production. In war, the line between survival and collapse is drawn by those who can adapt the fastest. The war has transformed Ukraine's military-industrial sector into a force that might shape warfare well beyond its own borders. But is adaptation enough when the battlefield itself keeps changing? My friends, thank you for trusting your time with me. Thank you for watching these videos. If you like this analysis or the past videos, click the subscribe button to be notified about future uploads and become a monthly member and buy me a coffee. Link is in the description below. I'll be butchering your name in the next video with my Estonian pronunciation. Stay tuned for it. Until my next analysis, stay cool, my friends, and bye-bye.